The power of sacrifice. The sun was dying on the horizon when Daniel closed the door to his humble home. His wife, Mariana, watched him with concern from the table, where their son, Lucas, was drawing with worn-out crayons. The rent was due the next day, and they barely had enough to eat. "Daniel, what will we do?" Mariana asked in a whisper. Daniel took a deep breath. He couldn't lie to her. He had worked all day in construction, but his payment was delayed. "God will provide," he replied with faith, though his heart was troubled. He stepped out into the street, determined to find a solution. He walked to the neighborhood church, where the elderly Father Tomas welcomed the needy with a hot bowl of soup. "Son, God never leaves us alone," the priest said as he arrived. "But sometimes he asks for sacrifices to test our faith." Daniel looked at him in silence, not fully understanding his words. Just then, an elderly man staggered in. His clothes were dirty, his gaze exhausted. Daniel felt a stirring in his heart. He had his last bill in his pocket, enough to buy some bread for his family. He looked at the man, then at his money, feeling a lump in his throat. It was time to decide. His mind battled against his heart. His family needed that money, but the old man seemed even more desperate. He closed his eyes for a moment and remembered Jesus' words, "Give, and it shall be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap." With a deep sigh, he approached the elderly man and handed him the bill. "Here, sir. Have a warm meal tonight." The man looked up, his eyes filled with astonishment and gratitude. His lips trembled as he tried to say something, but he could only nod and take the money with trembling hands. Father Tomas observed in silence, a gentle smile on his lips. "God sees what is in your heart, Daniel," the priest said serenely, "and he never keeps what we give." Daniel nodded, but his worry didn't fade. He knew he had done the right thing, but now he was returning home empty-handed, unsure how to feed his family. As he walked back, the weight of uncertainty pressed on his shoulders. Yet deep inside, an unusual peace surrounded him, as if he had placed his trust in something greater than himself. When he arrived home, Mariana greeted him with a questioning look. "Did you find a solution?" she asked, trying to hide her anguish. Daniel took a breath and told her what had happened. Mariana listened in silence, and though concern was evident on her face, she did not criticize his decision. At that moment, someone knocked on the door. Daniel and Mariana exchanged glances before opening it. What they found on the other side left them breathless. Standing there was a well-dressed man with a kind expression, holding a bag full of groceries. "Good evening," the stranger said. "Are you Daniel?" "Yes, I am," he replied cautiously. The man smiled. "Sorry for coming so late. My name is Andres. I work with Father Tomas at the church. This afternoon, he told me about you and your generosity. Your story moved me, so I wanted to bring you something." Daniel looked at the bag in Andres' hands. There was bread, milk, rice, beans, and even some meat. More than what his family could have bought with the bill he had given away. "But how?" he murmured in disbelief. Andres placed a hand on his shoulder. "God never keeps what we give. He always multiplies blessings." With tears in her eyes, Mariana took the bag gratefully. "You have no idea how much this means to us." Andres smiled and pulled an envelope from his pocket. "And there's something else. An anonymous man left this at the church, asking me to give it to you." Daniel took the envelope with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were several bills, more than what he had given away, more than enough to pay the rent and sustain them for weeks. He covered his face with his hand, overwhelmed with emotion. "God is good," he whispered, feeling a wave of faith stronger than ever. Mariana embraced him as Lucas watched with an innocent smile. That night, Daniel understood that true sacrifice is never in vain. God always provides. Daniel could hardly sleep. His mind replayed everything that had happened. Just hours before, he had given away his last bill without knowing what would come next, and now his family had more than they needed. He knelt beside his bed and, with tears in his eyes, prayed in silence. Lord, forgive me for doubting. You have shown me that you always take care of us. Help me trust in you more. The next morning, Daniel woke with renewed hope. He decided to go to the construction site where he worked to see if his payment was ready. When he arrived, his boss, Mr. Ernesto, called him into his office. "Daniel, I wanted to talk to you," the man said, shuffling some papers. "I've seen your dedication and hard work these past months. I know you've been through tough times, but I've never heard you complain." Daniel remained silent, unsure of what to say. "That's why I've decided to offer you a permanent position at the company. You'll not only have a stable salary, but also benefits for your family." Daniel's eyes widened in astonishment. "Really? But why me?" Mr. Ernesto smiled. "Because men like you, who act with integrity and faith, are the ones who truly matter. And also," he leaned forward slightly and lowered his voice, "yesterday, an old man came by asking about you, an elderly man with white hair. He said you had been very generous with him and that if anyone deserved an opportunity, it was you." Daniel felt a shiver run through him. "Did he say his name?" he asked in a whisper. Mr. Ernesto shook his head. "No, but he left this for you." He handed Daniel a folded piece of paper. Daniel opened it with trembling hands. Inside, only one sentence was written in shaky handwriting. "What you give with love, God returns to you multiplied." Tears streamed down Daniel's face. God had given him far more than he had ever expected. Daniel left the office with his heart pounding. He couldn't stop thinking about the old man. Who was he really? Why had he interceded for him? When he got home, he found Mariana preparing lunch with a smile on her face. "Daniel, come, look at this," she said, pointing to the table full of food. Lucas laughed as he played with a piece of bread, unaware of his parents' emotions. "Where did all this come from?" Daniel asked, still in awe. "The church brought us more supplies this morning. They said some people heard our story and wanted to help." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. Just a day ago, they had nothing. Now, they not only had food but also a stable job and even extra money. He sat at the table, took his wife's and his son's hands, and together they prayed with gratitude. "Lord, thank you because you never abandon us. You have shown us that sacrifice, when made with love and faith, brings unimaginable blessings." That afternoon, Daniel felt a stirring in his heart. He had to return to the church and find the old man. He wanted to thank him, to know who he was. When he arrived, he found Father Tomas arranging some boxes of food supplies. "Father, I need to speak with the old man who came yesterday. Do you know where I can find him?" The priest looked at him with curiosity. "What old man are you talking about, son?" "The one who came to the church when I was here. The one I gave my last bill to." Father Tomas' face grew pensive. "Daniel, no old man came yesterday." Daniel felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "That's not possible. I gave him the money with my own hands." The priest looked at him kindly and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes he sends angels in disguise to test our faith." Tears filled Daniel's eyes. Had it been an angel? A divine test? Whatever it was, his heart burned with absolute certainty. God had been with him through every step of his sacrifice. Daniel left the church with his heart racing. If that old man was not an ordinary man, what did it all mean? As he walked through the neighborhood streets, Father Tomas' words echoed in his mind. God works in mysterious ways. He stopped at the plaza, where some people rested on benches. His eyes scanned the place as if expecting to see the old man again. But he only saw familiar faces, neighbors who, like him, struggled every day to move forward. He took a deep breath. Maybe he didn't need answers. Maybe the important thing wasn't who the old man had been, but what his appearance had sparked in his life. He returned home with an inexplicable peace. "Did you find him?" Mariana asked when she saw him enter. Daniel shook his head but smiled. "No, but I don't think I need to. What matters is what God did for us through him." That night, as they had dinner together, Daniel felt a new fire burning inside him. He couldn't just sit back after experiencing the power of sacrifice. "Mariana, I've been thinking," he said, setting his spoon aside. "I want to do something for others, just as they did for us." She looked at him with interest. "What do you mean?" Daniel took his wife's hand. "To share what God has given us. We may not be rich, but we can help with what we have." Mariana smiled, understanding his idea. "That sounds perfect. How do we start?" Daniel looked at the bag of food still on the table. "Tomorrow we'll go to the church and take some of this for those in need." Mariana nodded enthusiastically. Lucas, unaware of the conversation, lifted his bread and said with a smile, "Let's share like Daddy did." Daniel laughed and kissed his son's forehead. The next morning, Daniel and Mariana woke up early. With a bag full of food in their hands and little Lucas walking beside them, they headed to the church with hearts full of gratitude. When they arrived, they found Father Tomas organizing food for those in need. "Father," Daniel said with a smile, "we want to help." The priest looked at them warmly and nodded. "God bless your generosity. There are many people who need support." Together, they began distributing the supplies. Mariana attended to mothers with children, while Daniel helped organize food bags. Lucas, excited, handed out small pieces of bread to those arriving. An elderly woman took Daniel's hand with bright eyes. "Thank you, son. May the Lord multiply what you give." A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. Those words echoed what the mysterious old man had written in that note. At that moment, he understood something profound. Sacrifice doesn't just change the one who receives, it also transforms the one who gives. Giving without expecting anything in return had changed his life. When they finished the day, Father Tomas called them aside. "God has touched your hearts, and that is beautiful," he said emotionally. "Would you like to help more regularly at the church?" Daniel and Mariana exchanged smiles of complicity. "We'd love to," Mariana responded. The priest nodded. "Then welcome. God has great plans for those willing to serve." As they walked home, Daniel felt his life had taken an unexpected turn. What had begun as a test of faith had become a new life mission. He knew he would never again doubt God's provision. Because when you give with love, heaven always gives back in abundance. God had not only provided for them, he had given them a mission. Days turned into weeks, and helping at the church became part of Daniel and Mariana's routine. What had begun as a small act of generosity grew into a genuine commitment to those in need. Each time they handed out a bag of food or shared words of encouragement, Daniel remembered the moment he had given away his last bill. Deep inside, one truth became stronger. Sacrifice, when done with love, is never in vain. One afternoon, while organizing donations at the church, Father Tomas approached with a smile. "Daniel, someone wants to see you." Daniel wiped his hands and stepped outside to the courtyard. There, under the shade of a tree, stood an old man with white hair. His heart raced. The old man smiled warmly. "I see you've learned the lesson," he said in a calm voice. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. "Who are you?" The old man didn't answer. He simply placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder and whispered, "God never keeps what we give. He always returns it in blessings." Before Daniel could say anything else, the old man turned and slowly walked away. Daniel wanted to follow him, but in the blink of an eye, the man disappeared into the crowd. He stood there, overcome by an inexplicable peace. Mariana approached, looking at him curiously. "Who was that?" Daniel took a deep breath and smiled. "I think, an angel." That night, as he knelt in prayer with his family, he understood that God had led him down this path to teach him an eternal truth. The true power of sacrifice was not in what was lost, but in what God multiplied. And he, Daniel, was a living witness to that miracle.